All right, so moving along here in Egyptian literature, we're looking next at the Tale of the Two Brothers, which is my favorite of all these Egyptian tales. It's quite good. It has a lot of mythological images compressed into it. It's not a long story, but it's very dense. There's a lot going on in it. And M.B. Seton Williams gives a very abridged, short version of it here in her text. And so the story comes to us from the New Kingdom, so it's about the same age as the Tale of the Doomed Prince. And these are more or less regarded as the two earliest fairy tales in the world, the Doomed Prince and the Tale of the Two Brothers. And they're about contemporary, about 1500 BC, New Kingdom. And so the two brothers then are a pair, they have the same names as a pair of gods from the 17th nome in southern Egypt. So it's a nome that is very well into the south, into the deserts. Anubis is the name of the older brother, and Bata is the name of the younger brother. Anubis, of course, is the god of mummification and the dead and the underworld. That's obvious. But Bata is a very obscure Egyptian god, very old, goes all the way back to the Old Kingdom. And he's a god of death who is associated with cattle and is pictured with two bull faces, so like a Janus face, with only made out of bulls. And indeed, as we'll see in the secularized version of the two gods, we'll see how the author, and all these authors are anonymous in these stories. We don't know who wrote any of these, unfortunately. That he's associated with cattle in the story. He's a cattle guy, whereas his older brother does other things on the farm that they live on. So as the story opens up, the two of them live on this farm. Bata's younger, Anubis is older, and he has a wife. So the three of them are living there. And Bata pretty much does all the work. He's out and about doing everything, especially handling the cattle, because that's his pedigree as a god of cattle. And then, so he goes in, and one day, so they're working hard on the field. They have a good estate going here in Egypt. They have lots of cattle and lots of abundance. And so they're working, and then one day, Anubis tells Bata, okay, so go in and get me some more seed for the field here. So we'll need some more seed. So Bata goes into the woman, whose name is not given. Bata goes into the woman, and she's sitting at her, whatever it is, a desk, working on her hair. And he says, fetch me some seed. Your brother needs some seed. I need to get out there and get it quickly. Would you mind? She's like, fetch it yourself. I'm working on my hair. He's like, oh, okay. She's like, go to the barn there and go get it. So he goes in and he fetches these very large bags of barley and emmer, huge bags, and then she's watching him. And then she gets turned on by his strength and virility. And so now he's in the situation of Joseph in the book of Genesis, which this story underlies in relationship to Potiphar's wife. Potiphar is the man who works for the Pharaoh, who rescued Joseph. His brothers tossed him into a well, and a slave trader came by and picked him up and then sold him to this Egyptian magistrate named Potiphar. And Potiphar has a wife who then does the same thing. She wants Joseph to have sex with her, and then he spurns her, and then so she accuses him of raping her, and then Potiphar then has him put in prison as a result. Similar kind of thing here. This seems to be the prototype of that. It also echoes into the Greek myth of Phaedra, Theseus, and Hippolytus. Theseus is the one who rescued Ariadne. He killed the Minotaur. She helped him with the string, and then he dumps her on an island, Naxos. And then he marries Phaedra, and he already has a son named Hippolytus. And then Phaedra does the same thing, comes onto him, and he spurns her. He's chaste, celibate, I guess. He's a worshiper of Artemis, who is a goddess of virginity, mistress of the hunt. And then he spurns her, and she accuses to her husband Theseus that the son tried to rape her. And so Theseus, and then she commits suicide and leaves a note to that effect. And then Theseus has him killed by a bull that comes up and startles his chariot as he's driving down the road, basically has a car accident and dies. So same thing here. Once again, you can hear these echoes of these primordial tales going out across the history of civilization. And so the woman, Anubis' wife, wants to have sex with him. He spurns her. He says, I regard you kind of as a mother figure. and my brother Anubis, who's older, kind of as a father figure. What are you doing here? This doesn't make any sense. He says, I'm going out to work in the field. So he leaves, he goes out to work in the field with his brother. But meanwhile, she's now worried because he's rejected her. So what's she going to do? So she decides to make herself up to look like she's been beaten. And when Anubis gets home at the end of his day and goes into the house, he says, what's going on? What happened here? And he says, well, your brother tried to rape me. He came on to me, tried to rape me, beat me. And I'm going to kill myself unless you have him put to death. I'm sorry. That's just the way it's going to have to be. So Anubis then gets very angry. He goes, grabs his spear, and he goes to the barn and hides behind the door as Bata is bringing his cattle in for the day. But it's a fairy tale, so the cattle can talk. And one of the cows says, your brother is hiding behind a door there in the barn with a spear, and he's going to kill you. So I would highly advise you to get out of here. So he does. He leaves. The brother comes out and chases him, and he leaves, and he invokes the god Re Harakti, the sun god, who then provides a river full of crocodiles to separate the two brothers. So he's on the other side, the younger brother, and the older brother's on the other side. And he says, what's going on here? To his older brother, and the older brother tells him what's happened. You tried to rape my wife. And he says, nothing of the sort. And he says, wait till tomorrow when the sun comes up and Ray comes up to oversee our interaction here tomorrow. So the next day goes by, and the sun comes up, Ray, and they confront each other across the river again. And the younger brother says, so what is the meaning of this, that you're making these accusations to me? I haven't done anything, and you haven't even listened to me. And he says, I will not cross this river again. I'm going to live in the valley of the Cedars. And there's some problems about the translation of the word for the tree here. Some scholars translate it as cedar, some as pine, and some as acacia. The problem is, acacias grow in Egypt, but pines and cedars do not. They grow in cold latitudes. So they are located up in Syria, in the highlands there, on the mountains. The cedars, the famous cedars of Lebanon, for instance, where Gilgamesh and Enkidu went. They went on a journey over land to the cedar forest in Lebanon to cut down the cosmic cedar tree, the world axis that is equivalent to Scandinavian Yggdrasil. It's the pole star around which everything revolves. And they have to fight the guardian there, Humbaba, kill him, and cut down the tree. I think this is the same place where Bata goes then. And so he says, this is what's going to have to happen, but let me tell you this. Here's what you have to do for me, he tells his older brother. If anything happens to me, I'm going to put my heart in the top of one of these cedar trees. And if anything happens to me, you'll know. If the tree is cut down, you'll see in your beer, it'll get all muddy, and you'll know. So what you have to do is go find the tree where I'm going to put my heart in the top of, and basically then it's a cosmic axial tree, just like the tree, the great cosmic tree in Gilgamesh. Same location, same basic idea. And so he says, you'll have to go find my heart and then resurrect me. So that's what you'll have to do. So that's where that episode ends. And then so Bata goes to live by himself for a while in the Valley of the Cedars. He's hunting. He's primarily a hunter now. He's not herding cattle. He's hunting. He built a house for himself, but he's very, very lonely. And so the gods take pity on him. He encounters the Ennead, which are the 9 Egyptian gods. And note that there's a reason why Plotinus, the Egyptian Alexandrian philosopher, calls his work of philosophy the Enneads. It's an echo of the Ennead of Egyptian mythology, where there were 9 gods. Atum was the progenitor god of Shu and Tefnut. Shu is the air, and Tefnut is the earthly moisture. So Atum, Shu, Tefnut, then the earth god Jeb, and the sky goddess Nut. Shu then separates them. Those are 5, and then we get the brother-sister pairs, Isis, Osiris, Set, and Nephthys. Those are the Ennead, the 9 great Egyptian gods, to which sometimes Horus is added. And I suppose Re somehow is just taken for granted as implicit therein. So he encounters this Ennead as he's out wandering, and they take pity on him, and they say, and Re says to Canoom, make him a woman. Create a woman for him, and so that he won't be so lonely. So Canoom is the guy who created human beings. He's similar to Enki in Sumerian mythology. He creates human beings on a potter's wheel. So then he whips up the most beautiful woman ever, like a sort of Helen of Troy figure, the most beautiful woman of all time. But the 7 hot whores come in who are the mistresses of fate, and they say she will die by the sword. So she's fated and cursed. But in the meantime, here he goes. Now, one detail I forgot to mention that's important. When the two brothers were standing across the river, some texts omit this, some don't, but I think it's absolutely essential. When they're standing facing each other across the river of crocodiles and going back and forth, Bata actually castrates himself. He takes out a reed knife and he castrates himself. And the genitals go into the water, and it's eaten by a fish, which is the same thing for Osiris. When Osiris was torn to pieces by his brother Set, the genitals were also eaten by a fish. Same thing here too. But although it is an echo of Osiris, I do believe that the figure of Bata is being syncretized with Attis. Attis is the great Assyrian god who originated in western Turkey in Phrygia, but has migrated across and is associated with pine trees. And he castrated himself, and so the priests of the cult of Attis and Cybele are castrati. They're eunuchs. They castrate themselves. Egypt doesn't really have a tradition of castration, despite the Osiris myth. They invented circumcision, which the Jews picked up from them, but they don't really have the tradition of priests being castrati, like Mesopotamia does. Actually, the priests who are associated with Inanna many of them are castrati as well. And so he has castrated himself, but now he has this beautiful woman to live with, but he doesn't have a dick. So there's a problem here already with this situation. And he tells her, he warns her, he says, okay. And so they're living in harmony. He's going out hunting, providing her with food. He says, make sure you don't leave the house, because I'm worried that the sea might come up and grab you. As though the sea were personified, as it was in Egypt, the Nile, by the god Hapi, who was one of the 4 sons of Horus. And she says, oh, okay. But one day while he's out hunting, she is out looking at the tree, the cypress tree, which is the same tree where his heart is. And he has told her this, that my heart is in that tree. So if anything happens to that tree, it could kill me. So she knows this. He's told her the wrong detail. You don't tell a woman the key to destroying you, because she'll do it. And I guarantee it. It is 100% certain. So she's outside looking at the cypress tree, and she's looking at it, and the sea comes up and sort of chases her back inside. But the sea tells the cypress tree to snatch some part of her really quickly, and as she runs by, it snatches a piece of her tresses. And then, so she goes inside, and then the tresses then go into the ocean, and it goes down, or rather up the Nile. I suppose it goes through the delta, and it goes up the Nile against the currents, which flow from south to north, against the currents, and it winds up near Pharaoh's laundrymen who are doing Pharaoh's laundry. So it's in the neighborhood of Pharaoh. And it has an incredible perfume ointment smell to it that makes him insane with this laundry smells so good. He's like, what the hell? So he comes out and he talks to his laundryman, and he says, what is going on with this smell? Find the source of this immediately. So they're flustered, and one of them then spots the tresses and picks it up. Then they bring in the scribes. So the scribes look at the tresses, and they treat it like divination. They're looking at it and they say, oh, well, these are the tresses of the daughter of the gods, the daughter of Re. That's what these are. So if you want to find her, what you have to do is send men out across the land, especially to the Valley of the Cedars. And the ones you send to the Valley of the Cedars, make sure you send a bunch of them. So Pharaoh takes the advice of the scribes. And when these guys get to the Valley of the Cedars, Bata, of course, kills all of them. So none of them survive, except for one guy who runs back to Pharaoh, tells him what happened. So then they send an army to the Valley of the Cedars. This is a long distance to go up through Palestine to northern Syria, where the forests are. You have to go through all the desert first to get to these uplands. So they get there, and Bata and his wife are there, and basically they have a woman that they've brought with them on the campaign who has brought a bunch of jewelry and trinkets to seduce this woman, the daughter of the gods. And harlot that she is, she falls for it, and she's like, well, this guy doesn't have a dick, so I'm going with Pharaoh here. The story doesn't say that, but that's the implication. So she hops on board the chariot, and they take her back to Egypt. Now Bata is just left there, and the Pharaoh asks her, so what about your husband, this guy Bata? What's the deal with him? And she says, oh, well, you know what? His heart is in a sacred cedar tree. Just fell that tree, and that'll be the end of him. So now this is the first of 3 times that she kills Bata. This is the first time. She sends the Pharaoh's army back out to Syria. They chop down the cosmic cedar, just as Gilgamesh and Enkidu do. Same tree, perhaps, symbolically speaking, the pole star. So they cut it down, and meanwhile, his heart is, of course, in the shape of a cedar cone. And cedars are related to pine trees. They have needles, and the pine cone is basically the same thing. So whether it's translated as pine or cedar, it's the same symbolism. The pine cone is universally associated with rebirth, with sexual fertility, virility. Just the Romans associated it with Venus and rebirth. And there's a huge sculpture of a pine cone from Renaissance Rome. That's what it represents, and the cedar cone basically represents the same thing, but it contains the heart of Bata within it. So now the brother is back in Egypt, meanwhile, drinking his beer, and he notices that it's turning to mud. Oh, his brother must be dead. So now he has to journey to the Cedars to find his heart to regenerate him. So he journeys to this forest. He's looking around. He spends 3 years looking for the heart. Can't find it. It's nowhere to be found. So the 4th year rolls around, and he decides, all right, I'm going back to Egypt tomorrow morning. So then he gets up tomorrow morning, gives it one last try, looks around, and then does indeed find the cedar cone that contains his brother's heart. So he takes it back to his brother's house, where he has found the dead body of his brother. And he has a cup of water, and he puts the cedar cone into the cup of water, and the cedar cone then absorbs the water. It's very crucial in Egypt, in rituals for the dead, that you offer them water, because the water has a revivifying effect on the dead in Egypt. So it absorbs the water, and then Bata shivers awake, and he's up and running again. And he says, here, drink this. So he drinks the rest of the water, and he's completely revitalized. So Bata is back, except that he says this. He has it in for that bitch who has put him in this situation. So he says, I'm going to transform myself into a bull, and you're going to ride me back to Egypt, and we're going to go to Pharaoh and pay a visit. And the brother agrees to this. He says, all right, it's a long journey riding on the back of a bull. But now there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here with this bull, because typically the dead are pictured in Egyptian art as they make their way to the underworld. They're riding on the back of a bull. Osiris, there are direct images of Osiris, the mummy of Osiris, riding on the back of a bull. So the Egyptian writer wants you to think of that. But the writer also wants you to think about the sacred bull with a capital T, the Apis bull, which is fundamental. In Egypt, it's like the archetype of the bull, which is a symbol of strength, virility, and rebirth. And it was associated with Memphis, and the Apis bull there was regarded as the offspring of Hathor, the goddess of the sky. Hathor means house of Horus. She's also the mother of Horus, but she's also the mother of the Apis bull, who is connected with the god Ptah at Memphis. Egypt is named after Ptah. Heka-Ptah is the land of the god Ptah. And Ptah is a funerary deity. She's pictured as mummified. And so the Apis bull is associated with these two deities, Hathor and Ptah. And he was ritually sacrificed. And there had to be certain special markings to have this year's Apis bull. It has to be black, and it has to have a triangle on its forehead. It has to have vulture's wings on its flanks, and the symbol of an ankh underneath its tongue. So it must have been very difficult to find a bull to match all of these signs and markings, but they did. And when they sacrificed the Apis bull, there was, like with the lamentations for the god Tammuz in Mesopotamia, there was mourning in the land until they found a new bull. And so here what happens is they return to Egypt, to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh thinks now that it's their Apis bull. They've got it back. Oh, it's a miracle. What a marvel. And he rewards the brother Anubis with all kinds of riches and gold. He goes back to his house in the meantime. And then so now Bata is incarnate as this bull, and he goes into the kitchen where his wife was, his ex, I guess we'll call her. He goes in there and he says, oh, by the way, I'm Bata. She's like, what? He's like, yeah, bitch, I'm Bata. You tried to kill me. You had me put to death. And I am him. I am he. So I'm still here. Surprise, surprise. So then she goes to Pharaoh, and the text just says it pleases him, whatever she does. I suspect something like a blowjob or whatever. And then she says, whatever I request, please give it to me. Exactly like with Salome and Herod. And Herod has been asked by Salome, because of her sexy dance, to bring the head of John the Baptist. It's that kind of thing. And so this goes on, and then she says, I want to eat the liver of this bull that you have brought. I don't think the bull's going to amount to anything. Please sacrifice it so that I can eat the liver. And Pharaoh's like, well, I mean, I really like this bull, but he doesn't want to displease her. She's his favorite of his harem. So he does. So they sacrifice the bull, they kill it. And while they're doing that, a couple of drops of blood fall on the ground as they're passing Pharaoh's palace, where there are two columns, two pillars in front of the entrance. And a drop of blood falls at each point, and a Percy tree grows up. Two Percy trees, Persea, grow up. And the Percy tree was sacred to Osiris. It's also an evergreen, as are pines and cedars. They are evergreens. They don't die and revive. They are associated with immortality. That's the whole reason for that. So these two Percy trees pop up. And the Pharaoh is really pleased with these marvelous Percy trees. So everyone is looking at them. And he goes and sits down in front of one. And she, the woman, whatever her name might be, goes and sits down at the other one. And then a voice comes out of the tree and says, I got you yet again. I'm still here. So he has been killed 3 times by her. First in the first case, with the felling of the tree that she advised Pharaoh to do, then with the sacrifice of the bull. Now we have the Percy tree. So notice that he has gone down the chain of being from being a human, reincarnated as an animal, reincarnated as a plant. So he's going down the chain of being here. The story, I don't find any evidence anywhere that the Egyptians believed in reincarnation. I can't, you would think that they would, but I can't find any concrete evidence of it. But this story nonetheless seems to imply it. It seems to imply the reincarnation of Bata as he's going through these transformations. And then so she goes to Pharaoh now, worried yet again, and says, I want these Percy trees to be made into furniture. Cut them down and make them into furniture. And Pharaoh goes, well, I mean, I really like the trees, but all right. So he agrees, and he has the trees cut down, but she's watching this. And as they're cutting them down, a splinter of wood flies into her mouth, and she swallows it and gets pregnant. That's a very widespread myth motif. But here it is also meant to evoke the sun every night goes into the mouth of the sky goddess Nut. She swallows it, it impregnates her, and she gives birth to the new sun every morning. So it's meant to echo that. But nonetheless, then she gives birth to a son, which now, note, is the reincarnation of Bata. So he's gone down the chain of being and has come back to human. So he grows up, the Pharaoh loves him, and then just before the Pharaoh dies, he says, I want you to be my successor. So the Pharaoh dies, and Bata, in human form now, becomes the successor. And he tells his attendants, bring me my mother, bring her in here. And he says, he tells the whole story. This was my mother and my wife as well. And she has done these things, and I want her put to death. So she is. They take her out, and she's drawn and quartered, pulled apart, gets exactly what she deserves. So that's how the story ends. And then he brings in his brother as he's on his deathbed, and he brings in his brother Anubis, and he says, you're Pharaoh next. So he dies, and then Anubis inherits the throne. And that is the marvelous tale of the story of the two brothers, which once again, note, has the balance. The Egyptian primary symbol is that of the balance. I think Spengler made a mistake. He says that the primary symbol of Egypt is this idea of the way, this narrow, smooth way upon which Egyptians glide, as it were, toward the day of judgment. I don't think that's the prime symbol. The prime symbol of Egypt are the scales, the balance. Everything comes out that way. The battle between Horus and Set. Here are the strivings between the two brothers, which echoes that, Anubis and Bata. The two lands, the two burial plots. Everything always has to be balanced. The Egyptians are obsessed with this idea of the two who are one, the two who must always be in balance. So I would amend Spengler's idea of the Egyptian symbol to that. So that is the story of the two brothers.